Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and we're doing a ruling video today, and we're covering meta rulings. We are updating you guys on last week's challenge ruling regarding the Big Bang versus Chaos Hunter scenario. I'm going to give you guys more context to it and why it's kind of like a ask your head judge kind of question, and you know, what is the actual correct answer. And then we also have a very important PSA. This PSA I'm probably going to do first because it's going to affect whether or not you get a random game loss in the tournament. I'm trying to save you guys from getting this penalty, and I'm trying to prevent people from using it as like a tool to shark other people. So this is something that I hope you do share with all your friends, especially newcomers to the tournament scene. All right, and with that being said, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and hit subscribe, ding that notification bell if I helped you out in any way or shape or form. It really helps me out, so you know, appreciate that. And don't forget to check out MSTmerch.com to get some awesome sleeve accessory and other great merchandise that will, you know, help your game out. Well, help my game out anyways. You know, it gives you like 99% more luck. Let's go. Let's start with the PSA. Your deck box can get you a game loss. That's right, it can get you a game loss. But what kind of deck box? What's wrong with my deck box? It's because you're using a double deck box. But more in particular, the reasoning behind it is what you did with that double deck box. You loaded it with 2 decks and you're using it for your main event. That's right, it's been very popular lately. There's probably more designs of double deck boxes. I understand the convenience of bringing your main deck plus maybe your GOAT deck, your Edison deck in the same deck box. However, if I lift your deck box and both trays come up, this is considered as one deck box. If that deck box is on the table, that is the deck box, and everything in that deck box, both deck trays, are considered to be the same deck. That is part of your content. And if you guys want an understanding what penalty you're getting a DE major, deck error major, and this is because your deck right now does not match your deck list. Perhaps one of these decks, if I only looked at half of your decks, it matches the deck list perfectly, your sleeves are perfectly clean, that's great. And then I look over to the other tray, and that is considered as part of your content, and therefore now you have 40 cards that aren't on your deck list in your deck, and that's a big problem. Not only that, your deck is illegal because now it's considered as 80 cards and you have a 30 card extra deck. Very unfortunate, and that's why you need to have them separated, especially for event. I get that a lot of people coming from locals, you don't get penalized for this at locals because no one cares at locals. You don't even have a judge running at locals, you know, handling these kinds of penalty, and the judge might not care. They might just give you a caution, just saying, hey, just move those cards aside, just don't use them. You might get a caution like that at locals because they are not as strict. However, when you get to a regional level, OTS or championship, anywhere where there are judges that need to perform deck checks now, they are going to issue you that penalty. There's almost no escaping it. You can't even appeal this, because if you appeal it, most likely the head judge already approved it, so he's gonna be like, no, these are part of your content, and that's the end of it. I've seen people argue against it. It is very unnecessary. So yeah, my PSA is don't put 2 decks in a double deck box if you're going to be going into a high level tournament. Stick with the single ones, guys. Stick with these one-sided towers. Maybe stick with these tiny deck boxes. Even these are better than using the double deck box when it comes to those big events like tier 2 and event and above. Don't screw yourself over with a double deck box. It was a very unnecessary penalty, and the worst case scenario, I'm gonna point it out right now, I don't really like it when players call a judge over and immediately I see that it's a double deck box scenario, and they call it because like, oh, I saw that my opponent has more cards in his deck box. Guess what's gonna happen? Well, someone's taking a game loss, someone's getting a DE major, and that's very unfortunate, and they'll be asked to put away all those cards before they can continue to play into game 2. So that's my warning to you guys. I really don't like issuing that penalty, but it's something that you guys can prevent. So always bring like maybe a spare empty deck box in case you do have to empty something out, or maybe if you do want to play, you know, the Time Wizard event. But yeah, you got to separate out those deck boxes. I'm sorry, guys. So let's give you guys an update on the Big Bang versus Chaos Hunter ruling, where I asked you guys, that's the challenge question. Do you guys agree with the way that I interpreted it? So to refresh your memory, so there's a Chaos Hunter on the opposing side of the field, and there is also an additional monster, okay? And then on, say, my side of the field, I have, you know, Xyz monsters that are Kashtira, I have a Rizar and Shangri-Ira, and maybe a Fenrir and a Unicorn. I have 4 monsters on my side, and I have a set Big Bang that's active. So I asked you guys what would happen if I activated that Big Bang. So if I activate Big Bang, what would happen? I asked you guys if the Big Bang was legal, and then I also asked you guys what would happen during the resolution. So if the Big Bang was legal, then the interpretation of whatever that would happen is exactly how I would have described it. Basically, the player that controlled the Chaos Hunter, they would be the one that would be stuck banishing, because Big Bang forces the player to perform the banishing. The Chaos Hunter prevented the opposing player from banishing any of their own card. Now, that is only the case if the activation was legal. If the activation was illegal, then none of that stuff happens and Big Bang could not be activated, obviously. So how did this interpretation kind of come about? And why did I even bother asking what happens if something is legal? Because these are certain cases where, sometimes the head judge would rule it as legal, sometimes they may rule it as not legal. So it really depends on the judge's interpretation of the activation condition versus the resolution. If they interpret the activation condition as a little bit more loose, as it affects either one player or both players, they can still resolve. As long as it affects one player, it has something that happens during resolution, then that's basically the interpretation that I went with, which is probably less correct than the one that's more strict. The one that is more strict is based off of the card text on the resolution, where they must banish monsters face down until they only control one. The must part means that, hey, it has to happen or you can't even activate it, and therefore you're interpreting it as the activation condition determines whether or not it is fully legal to resolve. And if it is not, because of the game state preventing it from occurring thanks to Chaos Hunter, then you can't activate it. Therefore the activation of Big Bang would be illegal, and I also agree with that. And therefore I think it really depends on how people are going to interpret it. But I guess my follow-up question would be this: what if the Cashier player only controlled one monster instead? They only controlled the Arise Heart or something along those lines, and then you decide to activate the Big Bang, but you also decide to also chain Preparation. What happens then? Now that you've summoned out an additional monster, that condition more or less still the resolution will definitely apply to you as well. But with the Chaos Hunter out, does neither player banish, or do you do as much as possible, where we get back into the scenario of, well, I guess only the Chaos Hunter controller will be the one banishing? You guys let me know down in the comment section. Okay, so I've got 3 rulings here. 1, let's start things off easy with IP Masquerena. 2, we got some Superheavy Samurai. And 3, this is the long one. This is going to relate to Purrely versus Herald of the Abyss. We're going to get into the details of that one because I want to explain the concept to you guys and not just the ruling itself. But let's start with the first one. So here's the scenario. What happens when the opposing player activates IP Masquerena and then you decide to chain enemy controller to take control of said IP Masquerena? They have 3 monsters. You decide to tribute your monster with the enemy controller as chainlink 2. So chainlink 1 IP, chainlink 2 enemy controller. What happens during resolution? You guys have 5 seconds to answer this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The answer is, in general, I would say the IP Masquerena's effect more or less is not able to resolve successfully. Now, it really depends, because IP Masquerena is performing a link summon, a regular link summon. You know what that means? It means that you can only really perform said link summon with monsters you control. And if you do not control the IP Masquerena, you will not be able to perform that link summon. So in other words, the effect resolves without effect. However, you can resolve with effect under the condition that you are going for a monster that can use your opponent's monster to do it, and you're using the IP as that monster. That is going to be Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. That particular monster, if your opponent does take control of your IP Masquerena and you do have 3 additional monsters, you're going to be able to kind of just use all those monsters and summon out your monster anyway. So that is one form of a bypass. So, it's yes and no. Yes, only under the condition that it is Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Question number 2, Called by the Grave. Everyone's favorite card that they wish they had more copies of. But this is Called by the Grave versus Superheavy Samurai, and in this particular case, this is going to be Superheavy Samurai Soulpeacemaker equipped to the Scarecrow. The Soulpeacemaker activates its effect and tributes off the the Scarecrow, but as a result of that, it also gets sent to the graveyard because it is no longer equipped. The opposing player activates a Call by the Grave on the Peacemaker. What happens on resolution? You guys have 5 seconds to answer this one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the answer is, the Call by the Grave will more or less not affect the resolution of the Soulpeacemaker because it activated as a spell, as an equipped spell to be more precise. And Call by the Grave's card text states, target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same name. Monsters with the same name. Okay, so now that we are clear with that monster with the same name, well, that was not a monster, that was a spell, that was an equipped spell, and therefore got sent to the graveyard as a result of, not being equipped anymore. And even if you call by the grave the card, the effect that is going through right now is currently the, I guess, quote-unquote spell effect of the Peacemaker. So, yeah, it's still going to summon out Super Heavy Samurai Scales. Yeah. If you don't agree with it, leave it down in the comment section, but this one's a pretty easy one, a pretty basic one. This next question is a big one because we definitely want to be on the same page for this, as someone could be getting a +3 or a -3 depending on how you resolve this one. So this is My Friend Purrely versus Herald of the Abyss. So My Friend Purrely, the part that we care about right now is if a face-up Purrely Xyz monster you control leaves the field because of an opponent's card. Even during damage step, you can add up to 3 Purrely quick play spells with different names in your graveyard to your hand. Okay, well, that's a lot of cards you can add. And Herald of the Abyss states that pay 1500 life points, declare one monster type and one attribute. Your opponent must send one face-up monster of that declared type and attribute from their field to the graveyard if possible. And for the rest of the turn, they can activate effects with monsters with the same name as the one sent. Okay, so we kind of get that. But in other words, the clear context is that you have a card, Herald of the Abyss, that makes the opponent do something versus the card wording of because of an opponent's card. So, does My Friend Purrely activate due to Herald of the Abyss? You guys, I'll give you guys 10 seconds to answer this one. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And the answer to that is you don't. And shoutouts to Gallantron and Pazim for providing me with a history of the context to this particular card's wording, an opponent's card. This whole scenario is much easier to interpret if you just ignore the word card. Why are you ignoring the word card? Well, if you read it as if a face-up Purrely Xyz monster you control leaves the field because of an opponent, even during the damage step, you can add up to 3 Purrely quick play spells with different names from the graveyard to your hand. Okay, Herald of the Abyss, makes your opponent send one face-up monster with the declared type and attribute from their field to the graveyard. It forces them to perform the action, and therefore Herald of the Abyss affected the player and caused the player to perform an action and not the opponent, and therefore it does not count. So the My Friend Purrely will not be able to activate for that reason. Yeah, and that's why the card thing actually confuses people. In OCG, the word card doesn't even apply in this context. It only says because of the opponent, and the word card is not even there. I don't know why the card got added in here. And this is something that's kind of just stayed with us in the game. But you might be wondering, what's the difference between, the opponent's card effect versus the opponent's card? Well, the opponent's card means something that was performed by the opponent. If your opponent kaijus you, then My Friend Purrely will be able to trigger and activate and add the 3. But if your opponent makes you do an action, then that doesn't count. Like Herald of the Abyss, Evenly Match, or even like the OG, Share the Pain, which forces them to tribute a monster. My Friend Purrely would not be able to activate because that is an action that you performed, and that's not something that your opponent, directly did to your card. Anyways, that's kind of like the simplified version to break it down for you guys, and that's all I got for this ruling video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this ruling video, this is probably gonna help you out, you know, in the coming format. So make sure you guys leave a big thumbs up for me, hit the subscribe button, ding that notification button, especially if I help you out in preventing you guys in getting a game loss, especially for the Deckbox issue. Guys, trust me, it is a bigger issue than you think. Then, well, just hit the subscribe button, and I appreciate you guys. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one.